And it looks like we have folks hopping on, so I think we can go ahead and get started. How do you feel, Elsa?
Ready?
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome to Maddie's Funds Community Conversations. As always, so happy to see you each week here. And I am really excited to share that I am back with my co-host, Elsa. So I'm Sheila Kukan. I'm with Maddie's Fun. I'm here with my bestie, Zeba. And you'll always see Jerry in the background. And we were just talking about cats. So let us know if you have your cats joining us today. And Elsa is my co-host for August. She is the bilingual adoption coordinator for Oakland Animal Services and has a really vast background in community engagement and community-centric programming. So I can't think of a better person to join me this month. Elsa, I'm so happy you're here, and I'm really happy you have Chella, your adorable cat, joining us. Thank you so much for joining me as Community Conversations host.
Thank you so much for having me again. Happy to be here. You'll probably see Chella's tail or her ears pop up during this call. Um, so I would love to share our question of the day with the audience. So I'm going to see if someone can put it in the chat. Oh, thank you, Allison. So our question of the day, and you can answer it in the chat, is on average, how much time does your staff spend with folks surrendering animals? So this will be about intake and how the animals get to your shelter. And we'd love to hear from you in the chat.
The chat is disabled.
It's so good.
Oh no.
I don't know if it is for everybody else, but it is for me.
What is it?
Thank you for letting us
Internet?
know.
Thanks, Kayla.
Yeah, it's disabled for.
I just fixed it.
Thank you.
Okay, try now. Oh, on average, how much time does your staff spend with folks surrendering animals every day? Someone said 1 hour per surrender. 3 hours. Depends on the situation. Sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes half an hour. Looks like for most people it takes at least an hour for each surrender, but depends on the situation.
I'm getting some private messages too. I have one that says there are requests daily. They work with owners over the span of a few weeks to intake and vet their animals. So it sounds like it can be definitely case by case.
Thank you guys for sharing. We can keep it going in the comments section while I introduce our speakers for today. Today, we're really excited to hear about the real reason pets enter shelters and how to change the story with Amanda Foster and Jennifer Reed from Human Animal Support Services, aka HAAS. So I'll introduce our speakers. Amanda Foster is the Director of Programs for the HAAS Project, where she leads research and data initiatives for the shelter programs. And she has held several shelter operations and management positions and is passionate about helping organizations make data-driven decisions that support both people and pets. Thank you, Amanda. And then Jennifer Reed is the Senior Education and Program Specialist for HAAS, leading education and partner engagement strategies. She has extensive experience in animal sheltering, including managing volunteer and behavior programs, and is dedicated to helping shelters serve both people and pets through innovative approaches. Thank you both for joining us. Please join me in welcoming Amanda and Jennifer.
Thank you. We're excited to be here.
Now we'll get our screen sharing going. 1 second. All right. You want to take it away, Amanda?
Right. Hello, everyone. Just as Elsa said, I am Amanda Foster, Director of Programs at HAAS, and this is Jennifer Reed, our Senior Education and Program Specialist. And we are here today to talk about the real reason pets enter shelters and how to change the story. So focusing on owner surrender and stray intake today. And a little bit of background on why we're here today. So, Human Animal Support Services ran a pilot project last year where we worked with a few different shelters trying to understand why pets are entering animal shelters across the country and kind of like digging into the root causes. But the project actually started back in 2020 when Human Animal Support Services started. And we were trying to understand what leads pets to shelter doors and really see it on like a national scale. So what we did at first was we took 13 shelters across the country and we got all of their intake data and we dumped all of their intake reasons together in aggregate so that we could try to get at what are the biggest chunks that we could kind of start chipping away at when we're thinking about pets entering shelters through like an owner surrender lens. And if you go to the next screen, Jen, what we found is that it wasn't super useful. Shelters were using intake reasons data collection in a lot of different ways. As you can see from this word cloud, we were seeing that general was the most common intake reason. Shelters were using the intake reasons field in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it was really human focused, sometimes it was really animal focused, and we just couldn't get at the full story here. Um, and really, that hasn't changed much today. But what we found was that this just wasn't giving us enough to build programmatic solutions around in order to support people in keeping their pets. And so we took a step back and said, okay, this isn't going to work this way. We can't look at it just based on one data point. And we need to move away from this traditional intake model that we're all using in order to really get to the root complex human circumstances that brings animals to shelters. And so we had to step away from just looking at the data and start looking at how is this data gathered and what does the intake process look like, so that we can offer quality support and keep pets and people together.
Okay, now we want to switch gears just a little bit. We've kind of talked about some of that big picture and how we look at data and information and intake scenarios. But now we're going to dive into a specific intake scenario and walk through an example together. So Amanda and I are going to do a little bit of role play for you, and be sure you pay attention because we're going to do an activity right after this. Okay,
Really
so I will
quickly.
start out. Sorry.
So, and I just want to give a shout out here to Dr. Alexis Lee. This scenario is specifically from a study that she did, and we loved it so much that we asked her if we could use it.
Perfect. Thanks, Amanda. I will be playing the owner, and Amanda is going to be playing the staff member. Okay. Hello, I'm here to surrender my dog.
Okay, could you tell us why you were giving him up?
Well, for one, he is really hyper. Every time my girlfriend or I get home, he jumps all over us. Also, my girlfriend is pregnant, and I don't know if having a dog is best for our growing family.
Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that. If you would like, we have a dog training program where you can get some assistance.
No, thank you. I think I want to give him up to you regardless. When I approach him while he's eating, he snarls at me and tries to snap at me, which is a problem. Taking care of him and the baby will be just too much. I won't be able to pay as much attention to him as I do now anyways.
I understand that.
Okay, forgive our perhaps bad acting. Okay, now it's y'all's chance to take a turn. Okay, so if you could take out your phone, hopefully you have one in front of you, and scan this QR code. We are curious what you would consider to the primary reason for surrender to be in this scenario. So we'll give everybody a minute or so to enter that in. Overwhelmed, newborn, too busy, behavior issues. Well, behavior's coming in strong, still holding strong, life change, funds, resource guarding, aggression, baby. attention, time. These are all great. There's no wrong answer to this question, by the way. Okay, so holding in strong, it's behavior, too busy, and overwhelmed so far. But as you can see, we have a lot of variety in what is standing out to everyone. All right, this is great. Thank you all. Okay, so let's take a look at this scenario again. And as you can see, we've kind of picked apart what happened in this conversation and highlighted a lot of the same things that you all just did in going through that exercise. And so what this exercise is meant to do is just really highlight what the limitations are of collecting intake reasons and how we are generally limited to that one singular reason. And even in this scenario, it sounds like there's multiple factors here. And I think too, depending on who's having that conversation, what things they tend to pick up on. I know at least for me, I probably show a little bit of a bias toward noticing the behavior angle of things. When I worked in the shelter, I worked in the behavior program. And so it kind of makes sense that those things would jump out to me because I know, oh, I better make sure I get that information somehow because it might impact pathway planning for that animal, for instance. So just goes to showcase how one complex scenario, there's so many different ways, at least from the data side, in which you could capture that. And how you go back and look at that data later matters. So the moral of the story here is it's complicated, and that's what we're going to dive into.
I love that example. And it really highlights how when we try to put these complex human circumstances into one field in our intake processes through our software, that depending on who is putting that in, the data could be really different, which is really interesting. So this graphic, I love it. There's a lot of words on it, so I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on it. You'll get the slides as well, but wanting to zoom back out to how people problems or pet problems, and when we look at these circumstances, there's a lot of different areas where we were seeing that there could be maybe some human assistance. If we had just caught this person upstream a bit, we might have been able to intervene sooner, and it might have, in some cases, not all cases, but in many cases, it could result in supporting that person so that the pet doesn't have to be intaked. So some examples of those might be partnerships with Health and Human Services, housing assistance, temporary shelter for the pet or the person, financial assistance, and legal aid, just to name a few. So all of that brought us to developing what we're calling the intake triage project. And when I say triage, and when Jen says triage throughout this presentation, we're talking about triage like you might get human triage if you were to go to the doctor's office, and mirroring some of those practices and processes in our intake lobbies to better support the person behind the pet coming in. And so the intention behind this project was to move intake from a transactional approach to more of a triage approach, develop a framework to understand more of those complex circumstances that are bringing animals in, going beyond that one intake reason that we might put into our shelter software, and really gathering a whole picture, and identify where to focus programs and resources to be able to support pets and their families and staying together wherever possible. We know that there's circumstances where animals need to come into the shelter, and that's the best case for those cases. So not trying to move away from that entirely, but just when we can intervene and support people who want to stay with their pets, how can we support them sooner and better? And this picture here from Greenville Animal Care is the space that they set up to do just that. So they took a small room in their shelter and created a private one-on-one space to have these conversations during owner surrenders. And there's a lot of findings and processes that we could talk about today, but we're going to try to kind of like go through quickly and give you just the high level takeaways from this project. We do also have 2 webinars that we put out if you want to get more in the weeds about this, and the Haas team will put that in the chat here. So this is just the tip of the iceberg on what this project is, and we'd love to talk to you more about it. But just to get started today, we're going to talk about this project through the owner surrender lens and the straight intake lens. So the first point of contact being when somebody first reaches out to the shelter, whether that's online, whether that's a phone call, whether that's in person, what are they doing when they first contact us? What do they need help with? And then at the point of intake of bringing that animal in, how do we what kind of information can we get, and what is the gap in what we're able to offer. And then the last part of this presentation, we'll touch a little bit on lost pet intake, where we gather information about finders and what they are doing so that we can utilize them best in getting pets home. So first, we're going to focus on owner surrenders. And just a reminder, we're trying to get to what can owner surrenders tell us about unmet community need. So what are the reasons why pets are coming in, and how can we support people in our community better? So really getting to the why behind the decision to seek surrender.
And one of the most important aspects to really trying to get to that why is really hinged on a conversational approach, kind of similar to our example earlier, but most things you may not have a rich understanding of a situation without having a more in-depth conversation. And so in order to do so, really leading forward with an empathetic approach without judgment, people can really pick up on if you are showing empathy and taking their perspective and showing that you care in any way that you can really lends itself to being able to set the stage for having a good conversation. So anything from asking open-ended questions, making sure you're being an active listener, and which can be really hard in the shelter environment, which is why I think that suggestion of having a separate space can be really impactful. You know, it's hard to limit distractions in the shelter sometimes. And being observant of the folks in front of you who may be going through a hard time as well. And, you know, going back to that open-ended questions, you know, for example, if someone comes to you and says, you know, I need to surrender my pet for behavior, I'm having a hard time. Without asking any more questions, that might be all the information that we get. But what we might find out through a good conversation is that it may not be the actual behavior that's really the thing that's standing in the way and keeping the family unit together. Maybe it's actually just a lack of resources or access to training support. And so that's just one example of, you know, what kind of information and what all you can learn when you're able to set aside that time and ask questions and to help identify the root cause or all the causes that's leading to this scenario.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about the support gap. So looking at a couple of the shelters that we worked with, we're going to compare what we heard at the first point of contact to what was actually walking in the door. And the difference here is not that people are changing their stories, but that the shelters are able to support more at that first point of contact and offer certain resources at these shelters that participated in order to try to keep the pet with the family. And the point of intake are those that actually resulted in a physical intake. The purpose of the gap here is to identify where can we actually build within our community to be able to support people so that some of these cases that are showing up at intake might not need to have an intake. And so one of the shelters saw most commonly they were seeing can't afford something to do with that pet, whether it's routine wellness or rent renting fees associated with that pet. Was what the shelter is being reached out to the most when it came to owner surrender. And then at the point of intake, they were seeing more pet-to-pet safety concerns coming in. Shelter B, I don't have point of intake data to compare, but still wanted to pull the first point of contact information out for this presentation. So they were unable to fulfill the pet's mental or emotional needs. And this is from the perspective of the owner. They felt like they couldn't support that pet and that there could potentially be a better home for them. And then shelter C here, they were also seeing that being able to afford routine wellness is what the shelter was being reached out to or seeing in their owner surrenders the most. And then at the point of intake, nuisance type behaviors are what was actually coming in through the door. And when we say nuisance behavior for this presentation, we know that that might not be the best language, but it's where we landed. Nuisance behavior for this purpose is kind of those low level behaviors that you might see that are incompatible with the home as perceived by the owner. So this could be barking, it could be scratching furniture, it could be high energy, things like that. Okay, and so we're going to do one more Slido, and I saw that some people were having some issues with the QR code. You're also welcome to put the information in the chat if you'd prefer, but would love to hear what you all think is the reason owners, or the thing that owners try before they contact the shelter. So if we ask owners what they've tried before coming to us, what are we seeing most often? Facebook posts. Facebook posts. Asking family members for help, other shelters, rehoming a family, friends. Training. Social media, family and neighbors, nothing. GoFundMe. Trying to rehome themselves. These are great.
Ready for next?
Sure.
Okay. They keep coming in. These are great. Thank you all.
So a lot of you got it, nothing. So the number one thing that we were hearing from owners that they were trying before contacting the shelter the first time was nothing. The shelter was seen as the number one resource to go to in their community for pet support help. And that's just a really important thing for us to keep in mind, that we are seen that way. And so a lot of times there might still be an opportunity during those initial conversations to talk to them about other resources that exist because they're coming to us for that. So following that, the other top 4 things that were being tried are things that we saw in the word cloud as well, but rehoming with friends, family, neighbors, or online, accessing resources like pet food, supplies, training, etc., surrendering to another shelter or rescue, and also returning to previous owner. So now we're going to talk about some of the top trends that we saw across these communities. I do want to reiterate that it is really important to look at your individual community and what the unmet needs are. But some of the main things that were coming up in this project were financial strain. And what was interesting is that when cost related owner surrender was being selected, it was being selected across multiple areas. So, which really makes sense conceptually when we step back and look at it. If you're struggling with financially supporting your pet in one area, it would go across multiple areas if you only have one chunk of money. So some of the things that were or could be tried when seeing this come up is partnering with human service agencies to offer more free and low cost pet support and reduce the financial burden on pet owners overall. We also saw the need for some basic behavior support. So we're not talking about human or animal safety concerns here, but more of that nuisance category that we talked about a little bit ago. So these are typical pet behaviors that may suggest opportunities for earlier intervention. So there's really a need out there for education for owners on like what to do when they're coming up across some of these basic behavior concerns like scratching on furniture, barking, and things like that. Another big takeaway was that people need to know what to do sooner. At the point of intake, we were seeing that 85% of people say it's too late to help with resources. So, really making sure that we're connecting people to resources when they're first contacting us or even before. So, getting that message out to our community about what's available so that they know in their head what they can do before they need it. None of us think about how close is the fire department until our house is on fire. So we really encourage that we get the information out sooner to people through our marketing efforts. Okay, now we're going to shift gears and look at the lost pet and stray intake portion of this project. So for this part of the project, we really wanted to focus on what a finder's perspective of the pet's behavior and physical condition were. The visual pet identification worn by the pet. So, does the pet have a collar on? Do they have a collar and a tag on? Um, the finder's willingness or interest in fostering that pet, and the finder's attempted methods to locate the owner before coming to the shelter. So the first thing we looked at was identification. There's a great study that was done by Dr. Weiss that looked at pets coming in to a community where pets were coming in to an animal shelter and found that 80% of owners agreed that it was important for pets to wear tags, but only 33% actually had a tag on their pet. And so this study was from 2010, and we wanted to know if we're still seeing that in these communities, since we know that while microchips are super great and important, physical identification that is on the pet is the easiest way for finders to get a pet home. So we actually found with this sample that less than 1% of the pets that were coming into the shelter actually had an identification tag on, which makes sense. If they couldn't get the pet home themselves, then they were coming to the shelter. So really important that there's community education around the importance of ID tags and keeping them on.
Quick note I want to add to that is the Dr. Weiss study also looked at they were looking at animals coming into veterinary clinics, so maybe like a slightly different audience of the public. So it's just kind of interesting, yeah, like Amanda said, to see that disconnect. And it's kind of like, we all have a million things on our to-do list. Do we prioritize everything? Absolutely not. I know I should exercise every day. Do I? No. So even though folks might believe something is important, might not always act on it, but maybe there's something we can do to influence that.
We also noticed that there was a difference between what owners were doing when they were trying to find their lost pet and what finders were doing when they found a pet. So the owner side of this comes from another one of our projects, but uh, we saw that both groups were looking around the surrounding area for these samples and that they were also posting on lost and found social media pages. But a lot of finders were still not doing anything. That number three. So a lot of people were just picking up the pet. Maybe I'm on my way to work, I'm in a hurry, and taking the pet to the animal shelter before trying anything else. We also saw that owners were visiting shelter websites before coming to the shelter. And so that just really points to the importance of us getting that information about a lost pet online as soon as possible. We also found that 1 out of 3 finders were willing to hold on to the found pets if they were supported by the shelter. Some of them longer than a week even. And so that just point, and I know that we've had other findings that come out that point to this too, but that there are finders that are willing to support and fostering pets that they're picking up as strays. We already know that they're invested in that pet's life and outcome if they're taking the time to bring them to us. And some of them, that's just what we've taught them to do, is to bring them to us. And when we equip them with the opportunity and the support to foster them or help find the owners outside of the shelter, a lot of the times they're willing to help. And what's really important about this is making sure that we're not requiring it, but that we're offering it as an option. So we're not forcing people to hold on to pets. We're just giving them the opportunity to be a part of the solution for that pet if they're willing to.
Oh, great. Okay, that brings us to the resource portion of this presentation. So I know we just hit the surface level on a lot of topics today, but Haas has developed basically a whole resource package for aspects of this project. So if you're looking to implement it at your shelter, hopefully we have everything you need to help you get started. I believe someone is going to be sharing the link to this in the chat, but you can also use your phone and scan this QR code. And I'm going to walk you through our intake triage booklet so I can highlight what resources are there, and that will hopefully kind of help you navigate those things. So let me switch my screen share one moment. Okay. That look good, Amanda? Okay.
Looks good.
All right, so you can access this booklet at any time. And again, it's really just a collection of resources for you. And it's also a nice summary for our talk today. So an overview of what we covered today and talking about intake data collection, really just highlighting, some of the limitations in the way that we often collect data at shelters and how it doesn't really allow us the ability to capture the nuance of what people and pets are going through. And so this guide and project work is really aiming to help us improve understanding of the causes of pet relinquishment or the needs for pet and people support. And really having quality data to look at really enables us to then plan future interventions. So it's kind of, as you have probably experienced, sometimes it feels like, we want to do more, or we want to have a targeted approach or strategy, but sometimes you feel like you don't know where to start. And having a good process for your data is a great place to start to really help you build a pathway to get where you want to go. Okay, one thing we did not talk about at length in this presentation, but I want to highlight it for you, are intake reasons in general. So even if you were to set up a system to capture data around these multiple reasons why people are seeking support, we do still have to put in data into our software, and might as well make that the best data set that we can. And so I know when I worked at the shelter, for example, a lot of times intake reasons are things like input into the software sometimes would get ignored or just slowly added to over time. And then you end up with duplicates, things that are almost the same, and it can get quite messy. So this is an opportunity to kind of take a look at your intake reasons to figure out, are they helpful to you, the way in which you have things worded and phrased, or do you feel like they are comprehensive to be able to capture all the different scenarios that you encounter every day? And so Haas has developed, with collaboration from a lot of industry partners and organizations and working groups, to compile a comprehensive list of intake reasons. And so as you can see here in this booklet, it's linked here. We also have detailed definitions for things. So if you're looking to revamp your intake reasons and you also need to provide staff training, we have that for you as well. So things like Amanda was referencing, like nuisance behavior. Well, what exactly is that? We've got all of that defined for you. And then in terms of data collection for detailed owner surrender reasons, like Amanda has really been talking about today, and capturing multiple reasons, we have resources for you there as well, including a video. And as you can see also at the bottom, there are links to download. So we have a guide to help you set this up. We even have downloadable forms that you can immediately replicate and begin to use. If you just want to do a plug and play option, you can. And then we also have resources for you if you want to collect data around lost and found pets, like some of those things that we reviewed today, like talking about stray pets, behavior and physical condition, do they wear IDs, finders' willingness to foster, and what finders do whenever they find lost pets. And then we also have a quick overview here about the difference between capturing intake reasons and pet history. So when we're talking about these intake reasons and really making them comprehensive but standard, that's really important when looking at that big data set. But we also want to highlight that it is still important to get that really detailed information like we often do when people surrender their pets. So all of the details about, their medical history, behavior history, their preferences, all of those things also hold a really valuable place in planning for pet needs. All right, and then we also have a video linked in here all about having a conversational approach during that intake process or the time people are asking support. So you can use that video potentially for staff training. So feel free to access that. And then right here at the end, it's basically like, if you're ready to get started, here's your checklist and your links to all the resources. So hopefully this can be kind of a one-stop shop for you guys if you're interested in getting started with any of these aspects at your shelter. Let me go back over to our slide deck. One moment. All right, so we're pretty much wrapped up here. I think we might have time for questions, but before we do that, we want to send a quick shout out to our participating shelters who, without their collaboration and willingness to try new things, we wouldn't be able to share all this wonderful information with you all, and to our HOS project sponsors. And you're also welcome, of course, we have time for a Q&A today, but at any time, if you're interested in reaching out to ask questions more one-on-one, or after you've had a chance to look at the resources, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're more than happy to chat.
I also just want to reiterate that we do have a lot more findings that are available. And so just check out those webinars or reach out to us and we can send more of those findings your way. But thank you all.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Amanda. This was a really great presentation, and it sparked a lot of conversation in the chat. So there's a lot of different topics popping up. One that I saw is a lot of people are really appreciating is that in Pause for Purpose in Eastern North Carolina has started putting scanning stations all around town, at libraries, fire stations, different places, and that sounds like a really creative way to give options to people who found lost pets. We are collecting some questions for you that we can share. So just a reminder to everybody, if you do have questions, please put it in the chat and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Okay, so we have our first question here. What kind of support did the participating shelters in your project provide for their front desk staff?
Ooh, that's great. So whenever we set out to do this project, there was a special process set up for how we're going to collect data and all of those things. But in addition to that, the HOS team traveled on site to the shelters and provided staff training. So not only to help them navigate the process, the very like how we're organizing, collecting the data, but also to talk about, what is actually changing in the flow of their intake or managing requests for support, and how do we marry that conversational approach and the approach just for collecting data together. So it's definitely really instrumental to think about how that flow is going to work. Does your staff have the time, the space, the technology they need to do all of those pieces of the puzzle? And it's really important to make space for that training because, depending on what your shelter is used to doing, maybe having a conversation or a longer conversation is not a part of their normal activities. And so you can say to someone, right, like, have a more detailed conversation, but what does that actually look like in the practical sense? So if someone says this, like what are good follow-up questions to ask? So even doing like activities like role playing or providing scripts to your team to really help them understand and how to navigate those really specific scenarios.
Yeah, that's great, Jen. And Jen talked about it a little bit in the presentation as well, but really making sure that we're setting staff up for success with some of these more in-depth conversations that might be the worst day of somebody's life when they're surrendering their pet. And if we're not used to having to have those conversations, and the way that that might making sure our team is set up, but also how does that impact the morale of our team to be having those conversations and making sure that we are really supporting the people that are there to support the people. So taking all of those considerations into this as well.
And it'll probably be more of a longer term learning process too, right? It's probably an unrealistic expectation to set for your team, especially if this is something brand new that we have a 1 hour team meeting and talk through some things and everyone's good to go. It's definitely more of a longer term skill to develop and comfort level as well.
Thank you. And thank you, Mary, for that question. We have a question from Terry Morris. Do you have funding resources that can be used in any state to pay for veterinary care? If anyone else in the audience has resources, feel free to put them in the chat as well.
So we do not have funds for this, but yeah, I would definitely welcome anyone to put that in the chat.
All right, thank you. And then from Katri Brewer, have you researched counseling when people come to the shelter to get a dog? What does that look like in order to not have later relinquishment? That seems to be a very important component. And I think I did see someone reply to that question in the chat about the matchmaking process, but anything else you guys want to add?
Yeah, so we didn't talk about it today, but that is actually another project that we are working on right now that actually Jen is leading. So, oh, she's getting you a link, I think. So we're also working on a project called the Modern Adoption Process, where we are looking at foot traffic of people coming in to adopt and building out counseling and resources to be able to really have good matchmaking efforts and conversations with people in order to increase retention. We have not yet analyzed that data through the lens of like census tracts and things like that, and return information, but it is something that we'll be doing once that project wraps up.
Thank you. And
Jen?
oh, did you want to add anything else, Jen?
I think you covered it, but I'll admit I was slightly distracted getting the link together. So
Okay.
let me know if there's something you want me to cover.
Do you want to just give a little pitch on the course that people could
Yeah.
start with if they are interested in getting started now and don't want to wait for the final findings?
Yeah, absolutely. So like Amanda mentioned, our modern adoption process, we're referring to as MAP for short. Much like the intake triage project, we partnered with a few shelters, did some implementation with them, traveled on site. And so through what we learned for them, they really helped us develop this free virtual course. But it's really aimed at kind of taking a step back with our approach to adoption programming and figuring out what else we can do to compete in this a market where a lot of folks still turn to breeders or buying from pet stores. How can we convince them to come to shelters and be interested in our animals? So this course really walks you through what does the landscape of pet acquisition look like to help you get a better understanding of what's happening nationally, and then what strategies and what data interventions can we take. So as you have probably been able to tell, we like data, and so we often start there and go, what can we learn from community feedback? And if people are leaving our shelters without pets, why is that? And by learning more about that, we can really plan our interventions to address those things. And so this really focuses again on meeting adopters' needs with a conversational approach and using data to help your adoption program strategize what interventions are best for you. So please check it out. There's a lot more in that than I even just highlighted, but it again is free and available for anyone. So we'd love for you to check that out and let us know what you think.
Such a great resource. Thank you. All right, another question we have from Nadia. Has Haas considered focusing research on how the intersection of race and other factors mentioned here impacts pet retentions or surrenders?
I'm not sure that this is quite going to answer your question, but if you're asking about, can you read it one more time? I want to make sure I'm getting as close as possible.
So, has Haas considered focusing research on how the intersection of race and other factors mentioned here impacts pet retention or surrender?
So we're not necessarily looking at race as a factor for surrender, but we are looking at through our Human Commonalities project, we're looking at reasons for surrender based on different parts of a community and how we might be able to match up community resources by ecosystem mapping with where pets are coming from in the community and what kind of resources might be needed to build programs to prevent surrender. So we will have some findings around that later in the year. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, thank you all. And then let's do maybe one or two more questions. From Patty Denny, what has been the most successful strategy you've attempted for communicating about resources over the last 6 months? We're new to doing this work and in our community we are new to doing this work in our community as far as proactive communication.
I think, and first hearing that question, one thing comes to mind that I've seen sometimes at shelters and even working in the shelter myself, where maybe there are resources available, but we don't always highlight them proactively. So like maybe they aren't listed on the website. Just to give an example, like I've seen sometimes where if someone shows up at the shelter, they have a need, they communicate it. It's like, oh, well, I think we can figure that out for you. But it's more this like almost under the table solution rather than letting people know it is available if you have it. And so that would be one suggestion I think we would have is that if you have solutions for people, let them know. That also might mean that they could reach out to you sooner. Like that one piece of data we shared in the presentation that a lot of times at some point in someone's timeline, it might be too late to help them. And so we want to avoid that being the case for as many people as we can. So if you have resources, share it with people and let them know. Amanda, do you have anything to add on that one?
I think you did great.
All right, we did have I'm sure there's a few more questions that are popping up in the chat, but we'll leave those for the Maddie's Fund Forum. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to add them there. We'll drop a link in the chat. Thank you, Amanda and Jennifer, for your presentation, and thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us today. So our two speakers will be available on the Maddie's Pet Forum throughout the week to continue the discussion. Please check out that link. And we'll continue the conversation here and on the forum with a reflection question. So what is something that you have wanted to try at your organization, but have been too hesitant, scared, or apprehensive to implement? The question is also on the screen now. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Elsa, for joining me as co-host. I'm so excited to be with you again next week for our last call of August. And it's a really special treat for anyone who loves animals and love Island the way I do. The presentation next week is Coupled Up, Matching Pets and People Through Barrier-Free Adoption. So definitely join us next week. Thank you so much to our incredible speakers today, and again to my co-host Elsa. If you're interested in hosting or speaking or have any topics that you would like to learn about, please go ahead and share your suggestions on Maddie's Pet Forum on our suggestions form. We'll drop that chat in the chat. Thank you, Allison. But definitely definitely looking forward to continuing the conversation with you all. Thank you so much, and see you on Maddie's Pet Forum.
Thank you.
Thank you both.